Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us for this latest episode of Big Brother's Big Archive. My name's Carl Bainbridge, and joining me, as ever, my co-host, Mr. Carl Dutton.
Hello, everybody.
And Mr. Joseph Tilley.
Who is she?
It's going to be a lot of that this episode, I can tell.
Yes, it is. This one took a hell of a thing getting together. That 1, 2, 3 of us. For the last 3 times, it's been me. Just forgetting to be on the call, or something coming up, or yeah.
Yeah, it has taken a while to get this recording together, but we are all finally together, and it's going to be worth the wait because we're going to be talking about what many consider to be one of the best Big Brother series of them all, which is Big Brother 7. And
voted by the public as the best series.
Yep, on the, I think it was the Big Brother 11 pre-show, they had a sort of reward show, and the public voted it as their favourite series. And also as well, it's starting off this almost golden era run of Big Brother series, starting from Big Brother 7, and we're going to be working back to Big Brother 5. And we've got 5 high-quality series coming up here. And as they mentioned before, this is the one that the public think is the best. The question is, lads, do you feel the same?
Totally.
I did think so, and then a couple of years ago I rewatched it, and it does get a bit boring towards the end. And I think that they went a little crazy at the end. Literally, the amount of people that were in that house was, I think it's the most ever, or something like that.
I think it was something about, I think it was 21 housemates this series has.
It's getting boring. Let's throw 11 more people in.
Which just to go off tangent's always been one of the things I liked about Channel 5, which they haven't had that. They've resisted that.
I'd like to see some of it, but definitely not this much.
Not to this extent.
No.
And I agree with you a lot, Carl. I think that Big Brother 7, yes, I understand why a lot of people do like the series. And I like it myself. I think I'd probably put it up in my top tier. But it does have a lot of flaws, which time's sort of forgotten about. And we'll bring a lot of those up when we get on with the show. The first thing we are going to do, though, is remember this: when Big Brother 7 first came out, Big Brother was still a big deal within the UK. We had articles about it in the Sun, the Mirror, the Daily Star. Obviously, it was still big news, and in my opinion, it never reached those same heights as what it did after Big Brother 7.
No, we spoke about that when we did the Shilper episode. From really 1 till 7, it was the biggest thing in the country, and from 5 till 7, it seemed like everybody was watching it. Even though I think less people watching it than 3, but just the public awareness of it and people talking about it, cooler talk, as they say.
Cooler talk that you've got to spot on, because I speak to a lot of people about Big Brother. I obviously try and promote the podcast to them, and most of them do say, I don't watch it now. I think the last series I watched was, quote, the Nikki series.
Yeah. I just think the celebrity one took it down and nobody really got back into it, and that's just how it happened.
And it's a shame. It's a real shame. It's a real shame as well. But we are going to be talking about Big Brother 7. And we're going to be starting off, first of all, with launch night. And we're going to be talking about those first 14 housemates that went in on that launch night. What were your opinions of the cast on the whole? Did you think it was a good selection? Were your hopes up for the series based on who you saw going in?
Okay, apart from one person, the first housemate, which I'm going to get stick about for this whole episode.
Have you talked about all-star housemate Bonnie Holt?
Oh, shut up.
She could have been alright, actually. It's another one of those.
Yeah, it's like, she went too soon, I think. She was definitely, up for it, but, if she'd stayed in a bit longer, I think she would have, come out of her shell more.
Maybe.
But we'll discuss Bonnie in a lot more detail, but on the whole, the cast.
Yeah, the cast, it was good. It really was. It was a good range of people. You've got older, younger, people with massive boobs, people with no boobs.
But we know where your mind's at, Joe.
Yeah, a good all-round cast.
Because I rewatched Launch Night myself to try and jolt a lot of memories about the series, as it were. And there were a lot of moments during Launch Night which I absolutely loved. I love they don't do it much now, but they actually played the crowd's reactions to the VTs as they were playing. And there's some great crowd reactions on there. I love the looks of shock when Bonnie shows off her midriff to the crowd and they just start booing it because of it.
Yeah.
And can you remember that gasp when Shahbaz makes that comment about himself? I can't repeat it, obviously, because of political incorrectness.
Because he's a packy poof.
Thank you very much, Joe. You got us censored.
And Scottish.
Yeah.
The irony was not lost on him.
But I totally have to agree. I think the cast for this year, I usually with a launch night cast, you can get a good sense of what the series is going to be like based on those first few that go in. And in my opinion, I saw those 14 and I thought, we've got a great group here. We could have a very entertaining series. Although I will admit, and there's going to be a lot of discussions about this, the moment Pete fell down those stairs, doing his Buster Keaton routine, he had the series of one.
Yeah.
I think people, for the sympathy fact that he had Tourette's syndrome, and then the fact that he came across this nice guy who was really entertaining, I think even the housemates on that first night were like, well, he's winning then.
Did it change your expectations for the series knowing there was such an obvious winner?
No. At the time, I was too naive to things. And then when I rewatched it, I was just like, wow, I want to rewatch this one. And that first night, I had such excitement about it because the product was hot, as they say. It was everybody was into it, and they looked like they had a great mix of characters.
Yeah. Other notes I made about the launch night, I just written them down here. Dawn's VT, which always gets overlooked, which is probably one of the most aggressive, nasty VTs that anybody's ever given.
Yeah.
And also, another thing I loved, Shahbaz's reaction to Richard.
Yeah, he was like, oh, another gay guy. Richard's like, no, thank you, not you.
Yeah.
Such a great cast. I'm really going to enjoy talking about a lot of these. But only a few hours after launch night happened, we got our first twist. We always get our week one twist. This was the Big Brotherhood. Did you like the concept? It was basically where, I believe it was Shahbaz and Lisa were the first two, called into diary room, and said you are the founding members of the Brotherhood, and you are going to start choosing housemates to join the Brotherhood. And those who aren't in it by the end of the week are going to be nominated, and one of them's going to be evicted.
Yeah, I think it was a good little starting task, just to get Lisa and Shahbaz hated.
Anytime they mess with the people's suitcases and stuff, it always works. And this is no exception, of course. This is when Nikki came out as the brat earlier on, where she's in there and the yelling about getting their suitcase back and all that.
Actually, I kind of disagree there that it wasn't as much Nikki as it was Bonnie.
Oh yeah, that too, yeah.
But
Bonnie really went off it about it.
In a strange way, though, I think the suitcases aspect of it was actually quite detrimental, because I would make the argument, yeah, week one was exciting, and it was largely exciting because of Shahbaz.
True.
But I think if you look away from that, there were a lot of miserable housemates. As mentioned, there were 2 quitters, and there were a lot of people who were sulking about the suitcases, and I think that's I don't think production expected that such negative reaction.
Because they'd done it before, and it resulted in Kitten going nuts, but other than that...
But it was only the one housemate in that case, and that was Kitten, who was always going to be week one fodder anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even with someone like Glen, because Glen, as we mentioned, spoiler alert, he ends up in the bottom 2 of the vote. And Glen doesn't really come out of his shell until after he gets his suitcase.
I think all the young people they expected it to be fun and all this stuff, and they went there and they were made to do things, and obviously didn't like that.
Yeah. Do you think as well maybe this series started that whole quitting culture within Big Brother? Because I don't know, I think before then, I think quitting was seen as a really negative connotation. You do not quit a show like Big Brother after you've worked so hard to get it. And I felt like with this series and the series afterwards, I think they started to embrace quitters a lot more, and it was more like, I want to go, okay, you can leave.
I do think that the people started doing it more often here, because I think at this point they thought, oh, well, I've been on the series, I've had my exposure, I'll still get the stuff that I want out of it. I think that's the attitude of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are going to move on, though, and we're going to be talking about one of those quitters. Well, actually, it's a bit of an argument over whether or not you quit or if you pushed, and that's Shahbaz. Really, there is only one person to talk about with Big Brother, and that is Shahbaz.
Do we have to? Please.
It was the big talking point, and it was a controversial talking point. First of all, the whole concept of Shahbaz versus the house. Where did you stand on that?
I think that he pushed himself too far, and he made himself hated towards most of the housemates. Pete was like he likes everybody, but he likes everybody anyway. But he made everyone else hate him, and I think I think I agree with what you said, that he was pushed out instead of he left.
What about you, Carl?
Yeah, it was one of those cases where there's somebody who's being bullied and you don't like it at all. The way he was being treated, especially by Caesar and his, inside group and the couples that already formed in that first week. The way he's being treated by them especially was terrible, but at the same time, he didn't do himself any favours. That was the problem. It was just like, okay, they're being unfair to him, but then he goes and hides everybody's food because he thinks that he's won it for them, and it was just like he's doing himself no favours. And then he ended up just making it worse. Everybody else just expelled him, and I think a guy who had some pretty deep psychological issues and thought this was going to be the thing that would fix that ended up basically having a breakdown on TV and being pushed out of the house.
Do you think the fact that Shahbaz was one of those first members of the Brotherhood played a part? Because I don't know, I just can't imagine Shahbaz having that sort of big bravado about him.
No, I don't think he would have been. He would have thought of himself in that way. Like, he's providing the food, so that means he wouldn't have hidden the food. He wouldn't have done any of that stuff. He wouldn't have even been in the spotlight. He probably would have just been one of the background people. I mean, other than his voice, obviously. But
there was something as well which really stood out for me about Shahbaz. I agree with you both that I think that the reactions to him from the other housemates was awful, but he didn't do himself any justice in what he actually was doing and saying. But there was something which really stood out for me, which was, I think when they were first confronting Shahbaz about his behaviour, he said something along the lines of, "We're all here to play a part, play your parts well." Almost as if, in my head, Shahbaz was implying, it's my role to be the annoying, obnoxious one, and therefore I'm going to do it because that's what's expected of me. Which is quite a dark attitude to take.
Yeah, I was that a defensive though, or was that him? Did he expect maybe that he would be loved by a certain member of the side of the house? Is that what happened?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think I hated him.
And it brings us on to the whole issue of whether or not Shahbaz should have been in there in the first place. Because the story I always heard was that Shahbaz actually failed the psych test beforehand, and production just said, stuff that, we're going to put him in anyway.
What I heard was he actually downplayed it. I think they knew, but he downplayed it just so he could get in the house.
But as Carl mentioned there, it was quite ominous that with this series there was a lot of that sort of pushing the boundaries of mental health. Not only with Shahbaz, he got all the attention for it, but I think we had Leah, who had body dysmorphia issues, Nikki with anorexia, Sam Brody arguably had gender identity problems. And do you think that maybe that issue of questionable decisions over mental health played a part in the negative perception of Big Brother post this series?
No, not really. I don't think so. I think, Channel 4 was pulled up by it, by various health and mental charities and such. But I think, on a whole, it was going to happen eventually, so why not do it now? I don't think they've done it since.
There was the freak show aspect to 9. I think that basically they'd had success with some of these outrageous characters, with the sciences and all those other ones over the past couple of weeks. Past couple of years, sorry. So then they said, okay, let's have a house full of those crazy type of people, and we got what we got, and they got criticised for it. I don't think it affected the popularity of the show, because obviously otherwise nobody would have been watching by the end. But I do think that maybe the press and that kind of attitude towards it changed.
I agree there.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because of that, we do lose Shahbaz, and we have to question though. I mean, I know it was uncomfortable having Shahbaz in there, but week 1 was brilliant because of him. Even if it wasn't enjoyable and comfortable television, it was entertaining and it was dramatic.
Yeah, it was entertaining, but I was glad when he left, because especially the way he exited, what he was saying, and it was just a case of I didn't want to see that anymore, because it was just, you could tell this guy was suffering.
And I think as well, I don't really think that Shahbaz could have offered anything else after that week. His whole gimmick seemed to be this annoying irritant, and I can't imagine him ever getting any sort of depth to him after that.
No, I think that week 2 he would have been booted.
One thing which was interesting about Shahbaz, though, is that we've seen in recent years that how these victims, people who are victims of bullying, end up getting this almost Gandhi-like portrayal in the house. Shahbaz never got that. Shahbaz was never like the universally beloved figure who we have to support because he's being bullied.
Because he all of his bullying he brought on himself.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
But it doesn't make the behaviour of the other housemates right. It's not right that.
Well, there was people who stuck up for him. There was like Leah comes to mind. There's people who stuck up for him, and then he did what he did, with as I say, with hiding the food and stuff. And then it was just like, well, we can't help you then. We can't not join the group now.
Sorry. That's the thing, because Leah actually said when Shahbaz hid the food, I don't think that's him. And then he admitted it, and she went off crying because she was wrong about him.
Yeah.
But she did stick up for him.
So I think the Petes and the Leahs and that and maybe Richard, but I think Richard was annoyed by him. That side of them would have probably supported him eventually had he not done what he'd done.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
But we unfortunately lose Shahbaz, and the Big Brotherhood continues, and eventually it leaves us with 3 people who didn't get their suitcases, didn't get their berets into the Brotherhood. Bonnie, Dawn, and Glen. They are 3 nominees. And it's actually, from what I remembered on the social media websites and forums, it was actually going to be very close eviction between Bonnie and Dawn that week. I don't think Glen was ever a consideration to be evicted.
No.
Yeah.
And then Dawn's code comes up to the forefront. What's your opinion on this? Because there's a lot of discussions over what actually happened, what was supposedly said, and it's almost basically led to the blacklisting of Dawn from the whole Big Brother canon.
I don't know. I still don't quite understand what happened. So
well, the story
yeah,
was,
stop explaining it.
Well, the story was that Dawn received a message from the diary room, which said, I believe that one of her relatives, I think a sister, was ill, and she admitted that was code from the outside world to say you're being shown badly, change the way you are. And production said that this code was a breaking of the rules and that she was going to be ejected for it. The story I always heard, though, was that Dawn had already expressed an issue with wanting to quit. She had enough of the show, she wanted out. But production feared because Shahbaz had gone, and if Dawn had gone afterwards, it wouldn't have looked good at all. So by painting Dawn's elimination as an ejection, rather than her quitting on her own accord, it would save them the grief that would come with the whole 2 quitters, Big Brother in Crisis storylines that would come afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. That's more of a kind of a conspiracy thing, obviously. But she should have been ejected for what she did. Maybe just a strike, but definitely should have been punished, because it was obvious what had happened was that the whole thing where Nikki and that were saying that she stunk and all this stuff. So then her sister said, "Oh, you're being betrayed badly," and she wanted out because of it. So
yeah, I think Carl's right that I think the code was you're being portrayed bad, come out now.
But when you look at the whole list of ejectees, though, it was a breaking of the rules. I get that, but to eject Dawn about it, are you trying to say that bringing a code into the house is wrong and should never be condemned, but I don't know, abuse and threatening abuse against a woman is okay?
Okay, yeah, she probably shouldn't have been ejected for it, but that she probably wanted to leave. That's what it seemed like in the diary room, actually. It looked like she wanted to leave, but they said, you're fired, before she could quit, basically.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that was maybe the wrong attitude that production did take. I think they should have just let Dawn go, and instead, by dragging the heels in, there was the whole legal case afterwards. Dawn apparently had a hunger strike because she wanted the footage which production wouldn't give her. It all got very complicated, and it was partly brought on by Channel 4 themselves, in my opinion. The one question I would like to ask, though, is had that eviction gone ahead, and it had been Bonnie versus Dawn versus Glen, who do you think would have been evicted?
Dawn.
And what about you, Carl?
Yeah, it probably would have been Dawn, because Bonnie didn't really do anything. She was just kind of the nothing week 1 housemate that went. Yeah, she definitely would have gone.
Fair enough.
But in terms of her ejection, by the way, what was she thinking? Like, you go onto a show that shows you warts and all, then you want to go out because it's making you look bad. Like, did you expect them to edit with it at this point? The live footage thing was totally. I don't understand that at all. Like, why would you go on a reality show and then be annoyed when you're being portrayed in a certain way?
Well, you could ask Dappy the same thing.
Yeah.
Another thing about the Dawn thing, the code, is I still don't understand to this day, but why the hell did it irks me? Why did Leah get upset that suddenly she's concerned about her kids and she wants to leave and she starts blubbering to Richard and Nikki?
I think that first week there was a very obvious power play by Caesar and his group, and I think some of the outsiders felt like they weren't part of that, so I think a lot of them felt alienated. So maybe a lot of them felt like they wanted to leave because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll actually bring up a lot of Caesar's power play when we come to the week 2. But the eviction does go ahead. It's Bonnie versus Glen, and Bonnie gets evicted with 78% of the vote.
Actually, I think you'll find that Bonner gets evicted.
Bonner, then. Well, you're the perfect person to talk about Bonnie. Tell us what you thought about her as a housemate, Joe.
The all-star housemate.
All-star housemate Bonnie.
All right. As I said, I don't think she got enough time to shine. I think if she'd stayed a bit longer, you would have seen, she would have taken her I want my suitcase energy and turned it maybe into I hate Grace and I hate Imogen energy.
I could have seen Bonnie actually joining the plastics, to be honest. She never... I can't imagine her...
Dickie.
Oh, I could never imagine Bonnie hanging around with the likes of Richard, Leah, Pete, etc. I think she would definitely be one of the plastics, in my opinion.
What do you think, Carl?
I always find it hilarious when basically the audience, the main core audience, especially that were voting at this time, with the chavs, but they hate chavs on the show, and they vote them out. But the fact that all we remember about her is her accent says a lot, I think.
And the VT. The one thing I will give Bonnie credit for is her VT is amazing.
Well, yeah, because they all say they're going to be this great thing because they want to get in, and then once they get in there, they're not that.
As much as we like to mock Bonnie on this forums, the one thing we'll say is I think maybe in a less extreme series, put her in somewhere like a Big Brother 8, a Big Brother 4. I think she could have been far better and a bigger character.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm getting a lot of echo, just to FYI.
I'm getting a lot of echo as well. We'll sort that out.
Obviously, because it's on my end where I'm recording, so just letting you know.
Yeah.
Is that better after mine down a bit?
Hello. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Are there any other great Bonnie moments that people remember? I think the her asking for a pink hoodie was quite funny.
Yeah.
And just how specific she was and how she was trying to get things from a suitcase. And we have Glen throwing them off really quickly. And then there's Bonnie being really specific. It's pink and it's a hoodie and it's got a zip that's like that.
Yeah, that was quite funny.
Yeah, I'm really stretching it though. I'm really trying.
But again, that's because of her accent. It's the same thing. Hoodie, Bonnie. That's all she had.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll move away from all-star housemate Bonnie. There are some people that do appreciate her, like how Joe here. But we are going to have to move on. And we're going to be moving on to Dawn and Shahbaz's replacements. And they were Ashleen and Sam.
Yeah.
Well,
Care to pick this up, lads?
yes. Sam she caused the drama that basically was the reason that the Great Hate started. So success there, even though that was very weird. And Ashleen, one of the best ever. So
Ashleen is absolutely
Sam was
amazing.
Weird.
One thing that I did find quite interesting is when I saw those two housemates together, I was thinking, what sort of purpose are they to the show? And I thought Sam was supposed to be the Shahbaz replacement. Bit too out there, bit quirky, maybe try and antagonize a lot of people. Ashleen always puzzled me though. I always wondered what sort of purpose Ashleen was supposed to bring in the producer's mind.
Ghetto girl next door.
yeah, there was nobody else in there like her. They had, and as I say, it's obvious she was probably going to go in there with the people she ended up with in the house next door, or the next lot of entries. But I'm glad we got her early, because it's pretty much what made the early parts of the show, along with the other drama. So
She was absolutely fantastic. I love the fact that when her and Sam came out the box, and Ashley's wearing this great big massive feather boa.
Mm-hmm.
Just sums up that sort of personality.
She looked like Marilyn Monroe with too much makeup on.
I can see that, actually. I really can. Did anybody ever know what happened to that boat, though? I remember people was having to ask questions to win the prizes, and that's how they got Ashley and Sam. But there was a great big massive boat, it was like something out of Bullseye, in the corner, and they never were able to get to it because Pete never won it. They always found that quite funny.
What were they going to do with the boat? If they had won it?
I think it would have just sat there. It would have just been a place for housemates to sit and talk. Sort of like the caravan in Big Brother 8.
Yeah.
But 2 go in, 1 more leaves. This brings us on to George.
Ugh.
George has to be up there as one of those massive, what the hell were they thinking casting choices, in my opinion. Because you could look at this guy, you could see his personality, and you could tell he was never going to last. He was just one of the most blatant stunt castings that there could be.
I think they thought... Go on.
Sorry, I'm just going to do a bit of a Nikki in. Who is he? I've never heard of him. He's like some distant royal.
Well, that was the whole gimmick of him. It was the fact, we've got someone who's related to royalty. They probably put him in a celebrity version if he was on Now.
Yeah, they would. I think that he was meant to be... what was his name from Big Brother 3?
Ginger.
Yes, I think he was supposed to be like him. He was supposed to be the posh guy, and he ended up being this. The only thing I ever remember from him was he had a thing going with Grace for a while, even though Grace was
Nikki. I think Nikki was the one who was trying to get with George.
Oh yeah, but he liked Grace, and then there was the thing in the hot tub where he came off as kind of homophobic.
I remember that definitely.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really that exciting, though. I mean, even on his VT, you could tell he wasn't the most interesting person.
No.
And one of the things, and it brings me on to what you said earlier about why do people go on these shows when they got solved these problems, etc. George said, I'm on the show, I want to quit the show because I don't want to be famous. You're going to be famous on Big Brother at that point in the...
You're in Big Brother during the period where everybody in the country watches it, and you don't want to be famous. Okay.
Yeah.
Unless he was a guy who was cast and maybe offered a bit of money to go on, I don't understand at all.
I can imagine that. And George screamed recruit to me. I just can't imagine someone like him waiting hours on end to get through the audition process.
He didn't really know what it was. It was like, that'll be fun. Got in there, didn't like it because it was a bit harder than he expected, and then, yeah. I
did love when they brought up the whole I don't want to be famous thing. I remember, I think it was the Sun newspaper covered the story. This shows how big the show was. The Sun was covering it. And they did a jokey chart, which was how famous is George? And he had like Tom Cruise at the top and Sooty. And I think he was placed just above Wolf from Gladiators.
I wouldn't say that now. I think people remember Wolf much more these days.
Yeah. But we move on from George, and we're going on to probably one of the first big story arcs of the series, which was Team Freak, as they like to call themselves, versus the Plastics. And basically the rise of Caesar as an antagonist and the beginning of the fall of Caesar storyline. What did you make of this, Carl?
It was obviously this house dynamic thing always usually happens. There was the cool group, and then there was the older, gays and Pete's and that kind of everybody who doesn't fit into the cool group, basically. And it always happens. It happened with this lot, except Caesar obviously was the biggest person in Mystery Shahbaz, but at the same time nobody liked Shahbaz, so they didn't like the way he was being, but didn't really turn on him. But then when he started doing it to their beloved characters, then it was yeah.
What I found quite interesting about that was that usually you'll find with production, when it comes to a villain, they almost sort of protect them a little bit. We saw with Charlie and Big Brother 8 how Charlie was being the antagonistic figure and basically got kept in week after week for that. With this series, though, it almost as if production were doing everything they could to hurt the plastics rather than almost help them because of their antagonistic status. And I don't know if that's because of the show at that time, where they were less reliant on villains, or whether it was because of the fact that they were actually specifically targeting Pete's group.
I think it was just that he was blatantly playing the game, and for some reason they didn't like that then, even though they let Victor do it for weeks on end. But I don't know, there was just something about him that they didn't like. And obviously, well, they were right, because what happened when he couldn't turn up to the finale, so obviously he was a bad guy. But I don't know, they just didn't like the fact that they were using codes and stuff and were cracking down on that this series. And I guess they thought that they had that many unique characters, let's put it bluntly, or not so bluntly, they had so many unique characters in the show, I think they
could afford to lose one.
Yeah.
Because I always remember Pete and Imogen, I think, got banned from nominating that week. And it was very harsh. In retrospect, it was actually really harsh, the reasons why they were banned. And part of me thought that, because if they had been nominated, the likelihood would have been they would have nominated Richard and Leah. Richard and Leah would have gone up, one of them would have went, and that would have been one person from that side of the house gone, and they could have arguably taken over from that point. But instead, Caesar gets the nominations to go up, and we end up getting the infamous 91.6.
Yeah.
Which we'll discuss a lot.
The funny thing was that, Caesar was so sure that he wasn't going to go.
Yes. Caesar set himself up for one of the greatest Big Brother downfalls, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That bravado, that sort of pomposity, and it made his eviction all the more better, in my opinion.
So sweet.
So sweet.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the top 3 best evictions of all time.
Yeah.
Just for how he became more of the villain after he was nominated. It was like, yeah, everybody's going to keep me in because I'm keeping the show entertaining. Who was he against?
I think he was up against Richard and Leah.
Oh, yeah, God, he was screwed.
Yeah.
I mean,
like Richard said, if you go against Richard or Leah or Pete, whoever it is against them, they're screwed.
Yeah. And it was always interesting that, like, with 91.6, I mean, that eviction total got beaten before. I think Nicole got higher than that. Everybody still remembers that, though. Caesar is that eviction.
Yeah, because it was we slayed the arrogant guy who thought he was going to run the show.
And his face is just fantastic when he realises, I'm gone.
Yeah, him, Imogen's, and Grace's face. Oh my God.
I don't know. Are they just that oblivious? They think they can go in there, be knobs, and then they think they're going to get votes. What show have they been watching? Have they been watching it?
Yeah.
But then again, you can make the argument Caesar was maybe another recruit. Because, of course, stockbroker. What sort of stockbroker is going to want to go on Big Brother?
Yeah, maybe thought it. But I can't imagine that anybody in England at that time hadn't at least heard what the show was.
Yeah. The only thing I say about Caesar leaving was it's a bit of a shame because he was, nice to look at.
You're so shallow, Joe.
Yes. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll move on though. In fact, to be honest, the whole of week 2 was great as well because we also had the geek task, which I thought was quite fun as well.
Yeah. That was quite a good task.
Yeah. We'll move on though, and we're going to come into week 3. Caesar's unfortunately gone, and we'll start with a couple of the shopping tasks and the mini tasks of that week. First of all, we had the shouting task, which Richard won by shouting the word "butch," which I always thought was funny. And then we also had the temp task, and this was really the first sign of Nikki emerging as a superstar in the show.
Yeah.
Wasn't? Yeah, she was Big Brother's assistant, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was the PA.
Yeah, she just hated doing it for the entirety of the show.
Though, such an easy job. All I have to do is sit down desk.
But that's what made her great, was she had the easiest job and she was just being a brat about it. That was the whole thing.
That was the whole thing with Nikki in general, though, because if you looked at what Nikki was always losing a temper about, it was just so simplistic things. It was bottled water. It was aircon. It was sitting at a desk.
She was just, and not that I'm not going to say this horribly, because obviously she has a whole thing about the fact that she looks like a little girl because of anorexia, but she was the spoiled brat little girl who was throwing her toys out the pram because she's not getting away.
The person who I've always compared it to is Angelica Pickles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think at this point, I think everybody hated her because of this behaviour. But then, towards the end of her run, people started realising, you know what, she is not a nice person. She is horrible, but goddamn, she's entertaining.
So
the thing I noticed as well is that halfway through, I think it was just after the temp task, the after party, was the time that Nikki snogged Pete, and then, well, I think she already knew he was going to win, and she started to cling onto Pete.
Oh, they all did. That was the story of that show.
We've actually got a whole segment devoting to the whole House Loves Pete saga coming up.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
think everybody was trying to curry favour with Pete in some way. Again, my cynical side coming out here, I think that's one of the main reasons why Richard in particular leaned towards him, because I think Richard knew he'd get the bounce.
Yeah. I always liked Richard. But
don't get me wrong, I've always liked Richard as well.
He was great in the diary room. He was maybe sometimes a little too harsh, but he was always a good character, fun to watch. But maybe I can't say that, because there was Shahbaz in the first episode where he was like, "Oh, I'm going to take care of you." So obviously that was it. But I don't think Pete ever. No, sorry, not Pete. I don't think Richard ever was more close to Pete than some of the others. I think some of the others were more obvious about it, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But from one great housemate, we come to another, though, and we talk about the emergence of Grace as this queen bitch character. Because I've heard that quote, Joe. Because it's hard to think, because Grace, in my opinion, in those first 2 weeks, because Caesar was the whole big bad of the show at that point, she was largely under the radar. But once Caesar got evicted, she took that baton of being the house villain and she ran with it, and it was amazing to watch.
There were their 3 accomplices, and then she became the head of the group after he left. And then there was the whole thing with Sam, and that was the moment everybody went, you know what, screw her.
Well, what did you make of that? What did you make about that, though? Like how Grace manipulated the house against Sam. I mean, it wasn't nice to look at from a personal point of view. Nobody likes to see people get bullied and ostracized, etc. But the manipulation Grace showed to get the house turned against Sam, it was almost...
She was being every bitch you've ever known. She was talking behind everybody's back, manipulating to make herself look better and to make the person she doesn't like or doesn't want around look bad. It was just the fact we could see it all happening, and the rest of the house were oblivious.
But if she was in Survivor or Big Brother America, people would have loved that.
Yeah. But over here, how dare you try to entertain us?
Yeah, how dare you try and win on a game show?
But definitely at this time, people didn't vote with their heads, they voted with their hearts, I guess. They wanted their favourites to win, and anybody who got in the way of that, and anybody who talked badly to their favourite, that's it, get out.
Yeah.
And it was such a shame as well, because you can't deny that Grace was entertaining. She was bringing the drama. She
was.
Totally.
But I don't think she understood. She pretended to not understand, but it seemed genuine that she didn't understand why she was being that hated, because I don't think anybody other than Jason and Victor had been that hated up until that point. And this was the start of, when we get to her eviction, of that chant that now will never go away. It's like the what chants in wrestling. It's just like, seriously, it was fun when it started, but go away. Seriously.
Is it still the what chant? I thought it's switched to yes now.
Yeah, but that's good because he's awesome.
Yeah. We're big wrestling fans here. But we'll stick on topic with Big Brother. I don't think Big Brother and the WWE have the same sort of fan bases.
Oh, well, both of us.
Yeah. We move on though, and we moved on to Sam's eviction. And Sam was up against Nikki that week, and Sam got evicted. It was actually quite close. It was only 53% for Sam to go. And it's actually quite hard to believe how the show could have been had Sam stayed and Nikki had gone. How the whole shape of Big Brother would have changed had that happened.
Obviously, at this point, there was some people who were enjoying her enough to keep her, and I think Sam, again, I think it's the same thing as Shahbaz. It was awkward television. You couldn't root for him, because, well, it is him because he's a guy now, but you couldn't root for him because of the way he, I don't know, there was just something about him.
But he wasn't obnoxiously awful in the way that Shahbaz was.
No, he wasn't. No, but
I thought Sam was a lot more of an underdog than I did Shahbaz.
Yeah, but I think everybody sensed that he just wasn't bringing anything to the show other than being the victim, whereas Nikki was bringing everything at this point.
I definitely agree there. If Sam had stayed, what do you think they could have brought? Anything or nothing?
No, nothing much.
No.
Okay. But again, it's that conveyor belt of the whole mid-series of Big Brother, how we had one person going out and another coming in. And this brings us on to the golden ticket. Which, if you remember, a massive campaign from Kit Kat. There was going to be a golden ticket hidden inside certain rappers, the whole Willy Wonka thing. If you managed to find one, you'd go into a prize draw, and that draw will get you a place in the house.
And who went in? The person who paid the most money. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's very cynical indeed. I did love though. I loved picking out all the different housemates because they went through all the people who could have gone in, and you were saying, oh, they might be good, they might be bad, they might be great, etc., etc. And I love that Pete was doing the same thing. Pete was doing it quite joking. I have issues with Pete, but I did love him how he was going, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one. Oh, she's nice.
Yeah, he was great throughout the entirety of the show. It's just that last week when you started to realise what he was doing.
Yeah. And one question I've always got to ask is, did you think that was rigged or not? Do you think it was a genuine lottery, or do you think they rigged it because
they still to this day claim it wasn't? But me, I don't. Why would they rig it for Susie? Although she paid the most money, I don't think that would sway them. I think they would have chose a better housemate if it had been rigged.
Yeah, I could definitely say that though. But of course, the thing that people forget about that whole draw is the thing that ended up clouding everybody's mind and has done for the rest of the entirety of the show. Get Grace out.
Yeah.
Thank God.
It was great television at the time. But boy, oh boy, I wish people had forgot about that chance since.
Yeah, it's because I think it was the impact of Get Grace Out. Because you can make the argument that it was Susie heaving those chants that made her target Grace and end up orchestrating Grace's departure. And I'm almost left with the feeling that the crowd feel that if we did it with Grace and we influenced the public in that way, we can do the same with other evictions. And so they do it every time, and in a lot of cases, it's unjustified. I mean, does Cougar Joe deserve a get you out chant?
No, it's got to the point now, every eviction, there's somebody who maybe this week they spoke up compared to the person who said nothing, so get them out, it's got ridiculous.
Yeah.
When it was just for the villains of the show, cool. But now that it's for, okay, we don't like you this week, you're the one who's getting the chant this week. It's ridiculous.
And I found it as well, I agree, amazing television, but I found it so unfair on the part of Grace, because, like her or not, Grace had put herself into a great position in the house. I don't think that a lot of people have caught on to how she was behaving, and I think she could have survived into the later stages if she kept how she was going.
Well, there was also the problem of Susie, who was out there, so she would have known regardless.
Yeah, but take Susie out of the equation, and take the chance out of the equation. I can't see Grace being nominated in the short term.
No, but Susie was always going to make the nominations, and whether they would have heard those chants in the house or not, Susie would have always voted for Grace because of that.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Now we come to the very Susie-centric week 4, and it brings us on to one of the hilarious tasks, State of Susie.
Yeah, it brought the classic. That was probably Nikki's best death on the show.
Nearly everything, though. I think there was like a 3 or 4 episodes run when Nikki was just bringing it every time. Because like on one day, it was the alarm continually going off, so she had to stand and pledge her allegiance. It's just her mannerism, just flinging her arm to her side, screaming as she does it.
Mm-hmm. And doing it with like gritting her teeth as she says it. And then Grace hated her because she nominated her and was stealing her stuff. So she was playing up. I love that she did that. I love that she didn't go back into her shell and was like, well, now I'll be good this week, so I won't get voted out. She was like, I know I'm going, so I may as well just have fun with it.
Well, was this the week as well where she started punching the pillows?
Yeah.
I think this was also the week with the
Who is she?
The top, yeah, it was the Who Is She, and I think it was also the week of the tonsils. I might be wrong, but I think it was. So yeah, this was great. This was her golden week.
So many great Nikki moments. I mean, I have to admit, I was more pro Ashleen, so I sort of had to.
Oh yeah, as a person, absolutely. But just this week was the week where Nikki was made forever.
Yeah. She was going to be an all-star just based on this week. But also as well is that I remember production. Can you remember production doing that immunity challenge? I think they clicked on that Grace was in trouble and tried for a bit of a task to help her out. Can anybody remember that?
Yeah.
Stand on the box and Nikki gave up after about
2 seconds. Yeah.
Exactly. This was them trying to give Grace something, and Grace just didn't. I don't know. She didn't care that much.
No. But of course, as expected, Susie nominates Grace and Nikki. Grace at this point pretty much gives up. And of course, the crowd do their bit. 87.9% Grace goes. Although, as much as I do hate the Big Brother crowd, I remember that eviction especially because I think the World Cup just started that year. Mm-hmm. And I remember they were chanting to the tune of Three Lions and they were saying, "She's going, Grace is going home."
Yeah, it was amazing. That's why the chant has stayed, because it was so good that first time. And the way Davina reacted to it, and it was truly, it felt like an event.
Evictions was so massive back then.
This year was a great year because, like, every time it was the live show and Davina was reading out the numbers and people were booing behind her and she'd react, she'd, like, pull faces and she'd smile and react with the audience.
This was the best that the show was in terms of the crowd reactions, in terms of popularity, in terms of Davina. Just everything was on its A game at this point, and that's why it's remembered as being so popular.
Yeah. But of course, Grace goes, and this is where we get to talk about Grace as a housemate, because you cast her in your All-Star cast. I came very close to casting her in mine. She has to be up there as one of the best villains of all time.
Because she didn't care. Like, so many of them hear the crowd and go, "Oh my god, what have I done wrong?" And she did do that, but then she was like, "You know what? Fuck them."
That's thrown me a bit off guard, that. What in particular was the standout Grace moment for you?
Her exit.
Just all the bitching and backstabbing.
For me, it was her exit. It was the water. It was the sorry threw the water on her and she left. And then her eviction interview was one of the best as well, because she was like, "I didn't do anything wrong," and they showed her the thing, give her a bitch, and she was like, "Well, yeah, when you put it like that."
The chuck in the water incident. I'm surprised there wasn't more uproar about that. I mean, honestly, that's an aggressive act, chucking water on someone. I'm surprised there was.
Yeah, but she was already out. What could they do?
Oh yeah.
I think if she'd stayed, she would have been reprimanded for it.
Oh yeah.
She wouldn't have done it if she'd stayed, though, would she? So.
No.
Maybe.
Let you go first, Joe.
As a maybe.
Yeah. But we move on from Grace, and we go to the argument after Grace's departure between Richard and Lisa, which I mainly loved just because of Richard's reaction. I remember Lisa getting really irate because Lisa had a foul mouth on her. She was swearing her head off.
She was horrible.
And I remember when the argument had finished off and she was stomping away. I think she kicked her kid's tricycle out the way while she was doing it, and Richard just taking the mick out of her, doing this like childish tantrum behind him, mocking it.
Yeah. Nothing against obviously her or the way she looked, but she was like an angry little
Wow.
troll. Yeah,
Yeah.
just this, the way that she scrunched her face up, and when she was annoyed, like when she was annoyed with Pete because she didn't like him anymore or something, and then she got into this huge argument and.
But it was another example though as well of Richard's sort of sense of humour.
Oh, he was amazing.
Yeah.
Seriously, I really enjoyed him. He always seemed like what our opinions were, but he'd say them in such a way that was so much more entertaining than anybody else could ever say.
Yeah.
Such a dry sense of humour. Richard's up there as one of the best diary room narrators, in my opinion.
Yes,
It was almost as if they always went to him to tell the story the production wanted.
He was like the American version. He's the
Yes.
Yeah.
He was driving the story along through his diary room entries.
Yeah.
But we move on though. Now, it's quite surprising. We're coming up to week 5 on this discussion, and we haven't mentioned Glen yet. And Glen really does come out of his shell. Week 5, this is basically our chance to discuss the antics of Glen during those early weeks and how he basically started to establish himself as more of a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't this the week where he was cooking an egg?
Yes, cooking an egg. I think
that was his
2 weeks
moment
ago.
where he became, he was the innocent 18-year-old who was kind of in with a cool group, but kind of got away with it because he was the innocent 18-year-old, same age as me. I was 18 at the time, but yeah, he was in there the first week in his swimming trunks and things. But then this was where he got the sort of mama's boy who's never left home, being taught by the others thing.
And do you think part of that was down to the fact that production had identified Glen as someone who could potentially challenge Pete?
Why would they? Why he was giving it as good as
No.
well. I think it was more of a people liked him for his personality. I don't think they ever did anything to edit him to look good.
Yeah.
There were some other great Glen moments as well, and you'll have to these might have been later on in the series or earlier, but some of them that I love. I remember Glen got absolutely plastered one night. I think he'd had a party. Glen got absolutely drunk and was like stumbling around. He was puking in the toilet, and then he went into the kitchen and he started puking there. And I remember Richard like running over, his arms flailing, not in the sink.
Yeah, and Susie was going nuts. She was the disapproving aunt or whatever.
Yeah. Another one is the whole in loving Leah kind of thing.
Yeah, that was quite uncomfortable. That Richard and Leah's relationship, not Richard and Leah, Glen and Leah's relationship.
I mean, the lap dance. Oh my god.
Oh.
Yeah, that was one of the best things about the Evictions was the Davina turning to the camera going, Glen's mum, maybe don't want to watch this bit.
Yeah. And then there was the whole, as I said, the after party for the temp jobs, and Glen and Leah had to kiss, and Pete was just behind there saying, "It's incest, it's incest."
Because I think he saw her as a mother figure, but she obviously had been a hot something in her time and saw herself as that, and I don't know, like, did she think she was going to take this young man's innocence? Like, what was going on there?
Am I right in saying as well, Glen described Leah as the perfect woman?
Yeah, because of her fake breasts,
Yeah. Another one where Glen got really hot on under the collar was, we didn't discuss it, when Leah was, she had the carrot. And, I won't go any further into that discussion.
Yeah, I think we'll bring that up when we talk about Leah later on, because that's one of Leah's more infamous moments. Other things that happened during week 5, we had another round of nominations where I think it was Imogen, Lisa, Mikey, and Nikki had been banned from discussing nominations.
Yeah.
Again, they got reprimanded, weren't allowed to nominate, and I think one of them automatically faced a vote. And then, of course, the other housemates did their bit, and those 4 went up. It's hard to believe when you look back now, though, that Nikki was nominated, I think, 3 straight weeks, and ended up surviving all of them. Especially when Nikki's basically now seen as such a divisive figure within the canon of the show. She survived 3 straight weeks of eviction.
I think she had enough fans at this point to support her.
Yeah. And other things that happened that week, there was a baton routine task, which I remember more than anything for Glen taking it far, far, far too seriously.
Yeah. He wanted to do it right, though, you know. I think what it is he's, as he said before, he felt like he's not really contributing. So I think he wanted to take it really seriously to try and make up for not being part of the team.
And the other thing I remember as well is Mikey enjoying it far too much for my liking.
What was the task again? Sorry.
They had to organise a baton routine. They were showing a video and they had to replicate it. And one of the things I always remember is because of Glen, everybody has this stern, serious faces on. And then it cuts to Mikey and he's loving it.
Yeah, because he saw him as like a little brother, didn't he?
Yeah.
Was this the week?
Go on. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, all right. I'm surprised I found a costume big enough to fit Leah.
Yeah, what was was this the week where they spoke in Welsh and that was a whole thing?
Thank you for reminding me about that. Me and Joe were actually talking about this just beforehand. Yeah, there was a big thing. I think in the early weeks actually, I think Imogen and Glen had a conversation in Welsh, and were told you can't do that. You have to speak English because it's an English-speaking show.
No, they said it was code.
Yeah.
Speaking in other languages,
Welsh is English.
Yeah.
And I think as well there was an issue that when they started using the subtitles on the show as well, they were inaccurate in what they were saying, and they were making Imogen look a lot worse in what she was saying than what.
Wow, really? Did not realise that.
And there was a big controversy about that as well.
But I think when they did the Welsh-speaking task, I think it was a bit of backpedaling by Channel 4. Obviously, they had the hand slapped by Ofcom. And then
people were upset by it, legitimately, yeah. If that had been, and especially, imagine if that had been, like, a foreign language of, Indian or something. That would have been far worse.
Or massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. We move on to that eviction, and we move on to the departure of Lisa, evicted with 60.3% of the vote. And this is our chance to talk about Lisa, because she was quite disappointing, I felt. I looked at Lisa as one of the big stars of the launch night, and I thought, here's this big, loud, obnoxious Chinese girl. She's going to be amazing comedy, and she was just this miserable grunt, basically.
There was a point, it was where she fell out with Pete, and from that point onwards, she just became miserable.
Yeah.
Well, I think Pete had a valid point, though, that she was, she was too full on with Pete. He said in VT, it takes him a while to get used to people, and he meows when he likes people, strangely. But yeah, she was too full on with him, and he didn't like it, and then the broke-up happened, and then she was just sour.
Do you think as well, though, that there was a lot of coupling up that time? Because we had Imogen and Caesar coupling up, Grace and Mikey, Nikki.
Oh, it was very early, wasn't it? They all thought, we'll be the showmans.
Yeah. But yeah, so is there anything else that you remember about Lisa? Did she have any other good qualities?
Well, another funny moment is when Pete had the bug on his finger, and he's, moving towards Lisa, and she's flinching away because she doesn't like bugs, and he keeps going towards her with it, and she's jumping out.
See, that's a great thing about you, Joe. You can just remember those sort of things.
Yeah, I think that. Wasn't that why he fell out with her? That because she was grumpy and because she didn't like bugs. I remember that being
yeah, because he saved a bee from the pool, I think. And
yeah,
she
was like, you could have killed it. Yeah.
Well, I can't blame her. You want to kill bees?
No, you don't. You'll be an arsehole, Carl.
Okay, I'm sorry. We'll move on then, and we're going to be talking about week 6, and it sort of starts to dip a little bit, I think, the series. I mean, 1 to 5, absolutely amazing those first few weeks. 6, it sort of starts to dip down a little bit, but big highlight of week 6 was the Aisling versus Leah argument.
Yeah.
And I believe this stemmed from the suggestion boxes as well. The housemates were told that they had to say something nasty about someone, but it would be anonymous. It was almost Channel 5 like in trying to instigate conflict, and I remember Aisling and Leah kicking off about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think production wanted to. They were like, "Oh, damn! All the villains have gone. Let's make some new villains." And so, what was it that they found out? It's been a while since I watched it. That they found out who it was who said it about them, or?
I don't think so, but I think Leah knew in the back of her head that it was Ashleen who said that about her.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was something like she shouldn't act like a sheep in a lamb in
Yeah,
its
mutton
clothing.
versus lamb.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
And
See, we're doing
yeah,
this.
and really, you mentioned there that production did need new villains, and this was really actually the start of Ashleen becoming arguably more of an antagonistic character and more of a prominent player within the show.
Yeah.
Because, of course, this week is pretty much all Ashleen, because we could get the house next door coming later, which we'll discuss. Other things that I want to discuss about this week, and it stems again from Ashleen versus Leah, which was Pete's involvement in that, and the whole House Loves Pete saga.
Yeah.
Was this just everybody trying to cling on to him because they knew he was going to win? Or was this people genuinely... Like, you could see why they liked him, because of the same reason the audience liked him, but he wasn't the likely stud of the house, let's put it that way. So some of the ones that you were like, that's a bit weird.
Mind you, he did have a bit of an advantage downstairs, I heard, apparently.
Oh, okay.
So that might have factored in a bit.
Especially for Nikki. Anyway,
I think it was quite uncomfortable more than anything though, because like I could sort of sit. It was the Leah.
The Leah one that was uncomfortable. Absolutely. Yeah.
We move on though, and it was Ashleen versus Susie for that week, and Ashleen, obviously, she's the big antagonist of that series. She would almost certainly have gone had it been a straight one-on-one eviction. Instead, though, she moves into the house next door. Couple of things I remember about that door. Ashleen wearing the single-handed worst eviction dress ever in the history of the show.
Yeah.
And just spending the next 5 minutes in the house next door with a mouth aghast, just this gaping look of just, oh my god.
Because it was the first time they'd ever done anything like that. They'd had the bed set, and that was the small version. And unlike Channel 5's version of the show, they didn't milk that one dry. They were like, let's come up with something new. And at this point, the show is popular, so they had the money to build something like that. So
you could argue the Secret Garden, though.
Yeah, but they'd never attempted this.
This was big scale.
Yeah. I mean, not as big as Australia did it. Australia did it even bigger, but with actual two legitimately sized houses. But
I'm surprised they haven't actually done that yet. Two houses, which all...
Because when it was the most popular, they did this. And I think the English version has always been quite cheap. Not as cheap as the American one. Dear Lord, they'll reuse a task thing as many times as it takes.
And they'll bring in Zingbot again, year on year.
Pay for that suit, they're getting their money's out of it.
But yeah, we get 5 brand new housemates coming into the house. We get Jonathan, Spiral, Jenny, Michael, and Jane. What were your opinions on those 5? Did you think these are going to inject some life into the house, or... I don't know, I always got the impression personally there was this feeling of they're leftovers. You could tell they didn't make the main cast, and this is why.
Yeah, I get that same feeling that they weren't as good as the originals.
What about you, Carl? Were you excited by any of the 5?
Spiral became the angry drunk later on, but other than that, not one of them added anything to the show.
Not even Jane?
Jane was the inappropriate, sort of naughty aunt.
Because I actually emphasised Jane's influence on the show a lot more than maybe a lot of other people do. I'd actually put her down as one of the reasons behind Nikki's downfall.
Yeah, that's the point, yeah, because I think Nikki was more bitter over Ashleen, but I think Jane did egg her on a little bit in that, like, the friendship between those two.
But we're on to week 7 now, and we're going to be talking about the whole house next door, whether we thought it worked or not as a twist. Because I remember there was a lot of issues about it, and a lot of people questioned the integrity of Big Brother, because after they started this twist and the house next door was supposed to not be unknown to the rest of the house, they knew about it straight away. They heard the noises from the outside and said, someone's in there, there's another house there.
Yeah.
And it really made people question Channel 4 a little bit.
It was just because the walls were probably paper thin. You know.
Yeah.
They didn't do a good enough job.
No. And I do remember, I think there were a lot of people saying, because of the failure of the house next door, this should be the last series. I remember hearing it on the radio, I remember reading it on the newspapers, is this the end for Big Brother? Those sort of storylines because of this twist.
Yeah.
I think people expected it to be this epic thing. The only way you could ever have made it epic is the way, as I mentioned when the Australian version did it, the only way to do it is to have two legitimate houses with soundproofed walls. They can't hear each other. They think they are the house. And then, by the way, there's another one. It's the only way to do it. If any side knows that there's something else going on, it ruins it.
Yeah. I'm just looking over things I've wrote down here. Now, the twist with the house next door was that Aisling was, in her head, going to be eliminating people from the house next door. In reality, she was sending them into the main house. And that arguably that ended up backfiring as well, because she sent Jane out thinking this is going to get rid of Jane. Jane goes into the main house, and because the walls are so stick thin and Jane's the big loud mouth, Aisling ends up hearing it, and then she knows, I'm going to send all my friends in now.
Yeah, so it ended up being she was left with the two people she liked the least, and then was really upset because she had to choose. What show did she think she was in?
No, Aisling's reaction during that decision. I mean, I am very pro Aisling, but she milked that for all it's worth.
It was if you ever seen a child cry, where they're obviously not really crying, they're doing it because they want something. That's what she was like.
Like crocodile tears.
Yeah.
Big time crocodile tears.
Yeah.
And it brings us on to the person she did get rid of, Jonathan. Is there anything to say about Jonathan?
I don't remember anything.
I don't think anybody can. I mean, there's actually some debate. I always do rankings on the housemates, and some people do ask me, is it right you're choosing Jonathan since you never actually entered the main house?
Poor guy never got a crowd.
That's probably the one thing that hit me more than anything. It wasn't so much Aisling crying because I think he milked it for all it's worth. It was Jonathan getting no crowd.
Yeah.
Which was good. I liked how hot, and we were speaking about how they were coming down the rule breaks. You know, it was a bit questionable sometimes, yes, but I liked how harsh they were to the people at this point.
Yeah. Although you can make the argument, Jonathan leaving the house not proud, it's the only time you'll ever see Jonathan and Jade Goody on the same pedestal. Along with Goss.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, Joe? We'll move on though. Now, whilst all that was going on in the house next door, we also had in the main house the silent disco task.
Yeah, this was one of the best ones.
Again,
it was great to watch. It was like the box task. It was something that was so stupid that seeing people do it made it that much better. And then, once again, Nikki. It's one of her best moments.
Oh, don't get me a big face.
Oh, it's working. As she's like literally just come off screaming 5 seconds earlier.
Didn't it last something like 13 hours?
Oh, God.
And I think Glen won, and he ended up getting this little toy trophy.
Yeah, a little tiny toy.
I love it. That's what I'm saying. I love how horrible they were to these people. That's what made the show at this point.
Absolutely fantastic. Also during that week, unfortunately, Richard and Leah were both nominated together, and this gives us the opportunity to talk about Dickie and Dolly, which I know are some of Joe's favourite housemates.
They didn't last very long together, did they?
Well, I don't know, 7 weeks.
What I mean is they were friends, and then they fell out, and then they were kind of friends again, and it was never really stuck. After that first time they fell out early on, they never really were the same.
I don't know, they did kind of get back together and were friends.
I think for a long time as well, they were co-DJs on a gay radio station.
Oh yeah, they became friends when they came out, but it seemed like just before Leah left, they were friends, but it wasn't Yeah, it wasn't quite friends. Yeah.
They were very much like sort of like the father and the mother of the house.
Yeah.
There was that sort of family relationship, especially with the so-called Team Freak, that we basically had this nuclear family of Richard and Leah as the parents, Pete as the child, as the boy, and Nikki as the girl.
Yeah.
Which I always found quite nice.
Nikki was the girl who kind of went in with the wrong crowd for a bit and then realised, oh, they're the unpopular ones, I won't do that.
Yeah. And Pete's going to win, so I'll do it for that reason as well. Now, if you give us a chance to talk about Leah as a housemate, she was eliminated 54%, again, quite close. Leah, for me, has always been one of the underrated housemates of the series, because I think her story arc as a housemaid is up there as one of the best, because here's Leah, she's naturally been one of these oddballs in her life. She's had a lot of personal problems. She was part of that outcast group. And I love the fact that she ended up winning over the public that were a bit cynical towards her, and ended up coming out to this great reaction and knowing that people liked her for who she was. She was quite a tragic figure, but she was quite complex as well.
It was fascinating to watch. It wasn't like Shahbaz, it was to the point where this was like a psychological study almost. You liked her, and then she did things that were horrible and that, you know, during the arguments with Ashley and that, and so you sort of turned on her for a little bit, and then she started the weird thing with Pete, and it was just like fascinating, almost again like a psychological study, watching this woman have a breakdown.
And then there was the carrot incident.
Yes. Yeah, well, Ashley's comment was harsh, but yeah, she kind of had a point.
After you say the carrot stuff, yeah. But it always sort of upsets me as well that when people talk about the great housemates from the series, they'll mention Nikki, Ashley, Glen, Pete, Grace, etc. Nobody ever mentions Leah.
She was one of the big ones in there, and I think that she sparked a big debate for a while that it never ever happened, but wasn't there a debate in Parliament that like the show was going to get shut down or something like that because of the way that people were being treated, and Leah was basically like suicidal afterwards? Or
I seem to remember that, and I think I remember as well. Am I right in saying that Leah was the first mother that went into the house, the first housemaid which actually had a kid?
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as what was it, Big Brother 10 with it was like a newborn child, but yeah.
But yeah, I remember that being quite a novel thing about Leah as well.
Yeah.
Joe's apparently on a motorway.
Yeah.
I'm
going to say Splendor. But yeah, do you have anything to say about Leah, Joe?
Yeah, I just think that she had her ups and downs, but she was a great housemate, and yeah, she was great.
Yeah. We'll move on from Leah though. She will return. Spoiler alert. But we'll move on to week 8, the infamous week 8. And the first thing we're going to be talking about is Jane's punishment and production's decision to put the entire house up for eviction.
Apart from Jane.
Now, I've always been, when I wrote down a list of all of what I thought were the top 30 worst Big Brother production decisions, I had this in my top 5. Because
I think it was great. I think it was a great move by the production to do that, because got everyone hating Jane.
That was their goal, obviously, but I know they probably thought at this point what ended up happening wouldn't happen because she had been saved enough times. But I think the problem was Nikki went after the big argument with Ashley, which we'll obviously get to. She just went into it. Oh no, wasn't it? It was during the Leah argument, wasn't it? That huge argument they had where it was "Don't get in my face, little girl" and all this thing. And then when Ashley came back into the house next door, Nikki sort of was reserved herself to, well, I'm screwed now. And then she just kind of started being miserable, and that was pretty much her downfall. I think with some people, although I don't believe that she should have gone out of everybody in the house. I know we're skipping ahead here, but I don't think production thought that was going to happen. So somebody else was going to go, and everybody would blame Jade, and that was going to be the whole thing. But that's not what happened. I just never understood why Channel 4 didn't think it was going to happen, because Channel 4, they had their own forum at that point.
they had Digital Spy, they had places, and they knew how unpopular Nikki was and how unpopular Ashley was. I mean, when I saw this twist happen, I knew straight away one of those two is going to go. And at that point, when them two were carrying the show, you couldn't afford to lose either.
Yeah.
No, I didn't see it. It was one of those shock ones. I love that we're also referring to production as Channel 4. Channel 4 are just the distributors. They didn't have anything to do with the show other than maybe some giant mandates. It was Interval, yeah. And basically the big decisions come from them. In fact, I mean, this is a little off topic, but I've heard that a lot of the things that we don't like about current Big Brother actually comes from Endemol wanting to change more than the new production staff they've got. But regardless, to get onto this, I don't know. I think that they thought they were going to get rid of one of the deadweights, but that did not end up what's happening.
Why didn't they make it a vote to save either? Lose someone like, I don't know, Michael Spiral.
That's the big debate, isn't it, of the Channel 4 era? It's why didn't they switch to that? But the show is making too much money at this point. They didn't care.
There's only two reasons I can think of why they managed to pull this twist. I'm going to run them through you. The first one was they thought, here's this opportunity to get rid of one of the deadweights, as you mentioned, get rid of someone like Susie, who production had built up a lot of hype about because of the twist and had delivered.
People didn't like that she went in. Why couldn't she have gone? Like, how the heck does Nikki go above her? Really?
Yeah.
Because Nikki was such a divisive figure. I mean, I do appreciate a lot of aspects of Nikki, but even I know she was unbearable to a lot of people.
I know, but again, these people there who just aren't giving you anything. And you probably don't. A lot of people didn't like her because she got in there with the golden twist, which they thought was fake. Get her out.
Yeah, but my other controversial suggestion is, one of the other theories I have is that production had planned the vote to return, and they knew that we could afford to lose Aisling or Nikki, knowing that the likelihood of them coming back later.
I don't think they expected her to go. I honestly, the reaction that Davina gave on that night when Nikki's name came up seemed genuine to me. Yeah, I don't think they expected that to happen. Despite what happened, they were like, "Oh well, she's been so entertaining. Nobody will vote for her." I don't know.
But that in itself was actually a good eviction, though, because I mean, a lot of
people... it was incredible. You know what? As sad as I was to see her go, it was one of the best evictions ever.
Yeah.
That sight of Nikki standing in the doorway, immobile, as this crowd screams for her, comes back at her.
It was superb. It was even though she had been voted out, which we didn't like, it was this moment where, okay, she's gone, so at least we get to appreciate her. And even though people didn't, she was decisive, that crowd were united behind her because how entertaining she'd been. And then the eviction interview was amazing because they got to see all of her highlights put together and her reacting and realizing how entertaining she'd been. Of course, when it comes down to it, when we talk about what happens later, is she then was aware of her popularity because of the stuff she did, and it was never the same ever again.
Yeah.
Well, we'll come back to it later, but do you think that Nikki going back in again sort of tainted her a little bit?
Yes, absolutely, because everything she did when she went back in was the fake version of what she'd done before.
Yeah. Now we move on to the post Nikki house. And it was actually gets really quiet here. I mean, there's sort of like that peak of weeks 1 to 5, then it dips a bit, and I think it really does suffer in the post Nikki weeks.
Yeah, it's like, wow, what have we done almost?
Yeah. Things that I noted about this week was Jane and Richard nominated, and again, it makes you question why did production go out to save Jane by not putting her up for eviction? Because you could make the argument Jane would go against Nikki and Ashley.
Yeah.
And yet she's up at the first chance she can get, and she's out the house. And this just gives us a chance to talk about Jane's behaviour just before she leaves. In general, the belching, the swearing, causing all the rule breaks, etc.
I don't understand her. She was just in there to cause trouble. She enjoyed causing trouble. She enjoyed making the house suffer for things that she'd done.
And she never learned about it. That's what annoyed me as well. Usually you learn from your mistakes, and yet she seemed to thrive on it.
She was, what, a 40-year-old woman who was acting like a 12-year-old for some reason.
And it did annoy me. And another thing that annoyed me, Spiral's behaviour around Aisling.
And this was before Nikki went. I think it was the night before she went, when he got drunk and yelled at her for no reason whatsoever. Like she looked at him or something, and it was really uncomfortable.
But there was stuff like the bum smacking as well, because Aisling would wear a thong bikini and Spiral would smack her on the bum about it.
Yeah, at this point he had become the stereotypical, I hate to say it, the stereotypical Irish drunk at this point.
But also, it also shows as well how strict, how lenient the show was back then. I think Spiral got a warning for that, but if you did that in today's Big Brother, you get ejected for it.
Yeah. They're so oversensitive now after the Shilpa incident, and it's amazing to see what they would allow pre that.
I mean, because in my opinion, there's no difference between what Spiral's doing with this aggressive abuse against a woman than Daly strangling Hazel.
Well, he never strangled anyone, but I suppose he did. Again, the way he yelled at Nikki was extremely aggressive. Yeah.
I was never the biggest lover of Spiral, and that's one of the reasons why. But it's Jane versus Richard who was up for that week. Jane ends up getting evicted. 2 weeks, during which time she ended up getting rid of the biggest character in Big Brother history.
Yeah.
Your assessment of Jane? Your assessment of Jane?
Jane, she was... she was whatever. Again, she added something to the show a little bit, but she ended up getting rid of one of the most entertaining characters, tainting the show for a little bit, and then left after doing not much.
Yeah. She was one note. That was a big issue I had with Jane. She was one note. You've been through the belching and you've been through the obnoxious behaviour. There was nothing else. She was never going to grow as a character.
No. Definitely not.
And again, it annoys me that we sacrificed Nikki to keep her around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just because I think at this point they were making so much money that they just didn't care, and they didn't think about, if it gets less entertaining later, we'll just chuck somebody else in. That was their attitude at the time.
Yeah.
We'll move on to week 10 though, and we're going to start with the best friends task. Now, for all the criticisms I do have of the later Big Brother 7, I do love the best friends task. Particularly, I love Pete and Richard as a pairing.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was fun.
Would you like to tell us some of the highlights, Joe?
Just all of them really. It was all just a really fun task.
One of the things I love, I remember they had to compose songs about each other.
Oh yes, sorry, I forgot this. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
Where Spiral was supposed to be a DJ and he was awful, and then Pete came on and did this incredible song, really funny, really entertaining, and you just cut to Spiral, and he just was so annoyed.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of Pete's song. Was something like, "Hey Dickie, this song's for you."
It was like D-I-C-K, he's a big gay. That's the line I remember.
I think my dad actually had that as his ringtone.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
You could tell this is where he was going to go in his career.
Yeah. But away from the best friends task, which actually had a part to play on nominations, because they had to nominate in pairs, which is quite an interesting twist.
Yeah.
And that ends up getting, I believe, Richard and Pete nominated. Michael and Spiral, and Imogen and Susie, I think, were the other pair. Yeah. But we'll come back to that later, and we're moving on to the prison task.
This was, again, another one that went so well. It was so good the first time, but boy, oh boy, have they mined this one since.
They've mined this one for all it's worth.
Yeah.
But the thing I love about the prison task, I mean, yeah, the idea of them actually having a room of luxury, that's good in itself, and that's the part which is being ripped off. But I love the other aspect about it. I mean, in my opinion, Glen and Pete in the prison together just making fun for themselves. Hilarious. Like
Yeah,
that's
and the
like,
and the guards were at first they were like, "Yeah, we're having fun with this," and then they were, "Oh god, we've got to stay up till 5 a.m. I hate this."
But
Yeah.
I love that scene of Glen and Pete, where I think Glen's taking the mick out of Psycho, saying, "Oh, this water's really good," and Pete pulls the curtain away and Jack tends to stab him.
Yeah, they're just an entertaining bunch of people, and again, you may be cynical about the way Pete was later, but he was entertaining. He was good.
He was entertaining. Don't get me wrong. I think it's maybe the era contrivance that's maybe it's down to like what's happened with what's having like 8 more years of Big Brother. Maybe a lot of these actions come across a little bit contrived.
Yeah, maybe they were a bit more naive at this point. Maybe we just saw it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, the prison task has that great twist where actually the prisoners are the ones living in luxury. We get that moment where Pete and Glen enter the room and they pretend to be quiet, but they have to be quiet, but they're obviously happy and excited.
Yeah, and then you remember, and then what annoyed me was when Pete started this whole hippie thing. He was like, I don't want to enjoy it because it's materialistic or something.
Yeah.
That was
And
weird.
it brings us on to another negative Pete moment with the letters from home, because I believe Pete switched from being a prisoner to a guard, and in the process missed out from the letters from home. And it was Pete's reaction to not getting his letter, which was particularly telling.
What
Yeah.
was his reaction? I can't remember this bit.
Essentially, he went off in distraught about it.
Oh, really?
The fact he didn't get his letter from home. And of course, Richard had one about his mum, and his mum was going through chemo at the time, and tears streaming down his face, which is an emotional moment. But Pete, I remember, went very in himself. He went very quiet. He was not impressed that he missed out on letters from home. We'll move on from that door, and we're going to moving on to that eviction. Now, for all we criticised production for not doing the for not using a vote to save during the Nikki eviction, they did it with this one, which I found quite interesting. They switched it to a vote to save. Michael and Spiral, and as the pair, ended up getting nominated and evicted together. Now, what do you think about that, though? The switch to a vote to save. Do you think it was because they were scared that Richard's negativity would pull down Pete?
Maybe, but I think this. Yeah, I think they were like, oh god, let's get one of these useless ones out of here. Let's not lose the only 2 ones we've got left.
One.
Yeah.
Who do you think would have gone if it was a vote to evict in those 3 pairs?
Probably Michael and Spiral.
Yeah, maybe me. Yeah, probably because of Spiral's behaviour. But I think that he was. Yeah, he definitely done enough to get a bit of ire. I don't think Richard or Pete would have gone. Definitely not.
No.
Either way, but it worked. Either way. Of all the weeks though to pull out vote to save, they pulled it out when they didn't need it.
Exactly. That's why I asked the question. Use it during the Nikki week. Save Nikki and Ashley and get rid of Edward then.
Yeah, again. We know more than some people who run the show sometimes, I guess.
Because we have too much time on our hands.
Yeah.
But today's a chance to talk about Michael and Spiral. We already touched on Spiral a little bit with his behaviour around Ashley. Was there anything more to him?
No, again, he was when he came in, he was supposed to be the comedy character. Then he ended up being extremely bitter, and that was all he was.
Yeah. And in terms of Michael, I think the only real thing that Michael brought to the show was maybe bringing out a slightly nasty side in Richard. I think Richard enjoyed being the only gay in the village, and I think Michael being there sort of hurt him a little bit. But apart from that, the only thing I can think about Michael is his stuffed cat. Annoying Richard and the stuffed cat's the only things I can remember about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nope.
No, not really.
Shows how great those late entries were. But we move on, and we're going to move on to week 11, an automated Big Brother.
Yes.
Oh, this was another great one.
This was a great one. First of all, I love the behaviour again. It's the Glen and Pete partnership, and I love them two in the diary room, especially when they had the waiting jingle, and it was just started using it as an excuse to dance.
Yeah, but of course the highlight was
Susie.
Susie, where she was in there on hold. That was absolutely brilliant. When they first started it was like, okay, this is fun, an automated voice or whatever. But then when they were doing things like that to them, that's what made it.
I think I read somewhere Susie was in there for about 2 hours.
Yeah. And she was like, oh, Jesus God, guys, she was the best person to do it to. Although, I have to wonder if Nikki had still been in there, that would have been arguably even
That
better.
would have been amazing.
Can I just bring up, have I missed the bit with the cold kebab with Susie, or is that to come yet?
I think cold kebab might have been during Jane's week.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
week?
she had to eat a kebab, and she looked at it. She basically acted
Yes,
like
didn't want it.
it
Yeah,
was the worst thing she'd ever seen.
yeah, that was a good moment.
She acted like she was eating the bugs on I'm a Celebrity or something.
Hey,
Yeah.
that's a luxury meal up here in the northeast.
Yep.
My attempted comedy there. I'll cut it out.
I'll insert a laugh track. There we go.
Yeah. But also we get the other things that happen during that week. We get the university task, which I see more than anything as an attempt to try and build some sort of chemistry between Jenny and Pete, because they have to do Midsummer Night's Dream between each other.
Yeah,
Because if Pete needed one more thing, it was somebody falling over him. We haven't had enough of that this series.
Yeah. But the one thing I love about that task as well is, I think the part that Pete enjoyed the most about it was the fact he was playing a giant donkey. I mean, that was the only thing he was talking about. He was just loving the fact he was a giant donkey.
I think he liked
Yeah.
anything that allowed him to be stupid. That was his whole thing.
Yeah. We get the nominations, and we get Mikey, Susie, Jenny, and Imogen nominated. And then we get Mikey's implosion during the midweek. Now, Mikey had been this very tepid character. He'd been very middle of the road. He'd been quite positive. He was one of the very lesser lights of the Plastics. And yet, during this week, he just absolutely goes berserk, and he's looking for arguments in everything. I remember they got a pool table as part of the university setup. Him and Glen were playing. And they're getting into this blazing row about where the white ball goes after it gets potted.
yeah.
I think he was fed. I think he was fed up. Before that, he was just the nice guy who was kind of part of the cool group, but he was just kind of the nice one of them. And then, I don't know. I think he just got fed up with it all and decided maybe if the cynical side could say maybe he did it to get taken out because he couldn't be bothered anymore.
I could say that. But it also led to a very interesting decision by production. This was always advertised as being a one-person eviction. And then on the last day, they switched it to a double. And my cynical side of me thinks they did that because Mikey had overtaken Susie and production were desperate to get rid of her.
Again,
Yeah.
do it on the week when she's up and save Nikki. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I thought you were going to be very anti-Nikki Karl.
I loved her. She was one of my favourite housemates ever. I think she was a brat, but when she was on the show, she was the best thing about the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, so Mikey gets evicted first, and this is our chance to talk about Mikey. Again, as we just mentioned before, this very middle of the road character, arguably one of the nicer people of the Plastics, but not much else. Especially when you looked at his VT and he saw himself as basically the sexist pig.
Yeah.
And he's just middle of the road, alpha male, doesn't really do anything.
And I think,
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, if you can speak about those two, I think it's very telling that all of the so-called hero or popular couples always break up. Grace and Mikey are still together.
Which
Yeah.
I do. Am I right in saying you have a couple of kids now?
Yeah, they're married with kids and everything, yeah.
Which is absolutely fantastic, because I know people are a bit cynical about showmancers, but when they genuinely work.
Yeah, and again, it was a villain group, but I think again, it's when when he stuck around with her despite those chants, that's when you can tell it was for real and not for the show. Whereas I think again, the cynical side of us would say that some of the ones that happened, especially later on with Pete, were for the exact reason that he was getting cheered.
Yeah, but of course Mikey ends up going, and then a couple of minutes later, after he's done his interview, Davina comes back onto the house, and Susie is evicted. This is going to be a fun one, talking about Susie. Although I will note, again, I've always felt the production did want to get rid of Susie for a long time because of the fact she was the golden ticket housemaid, she wasn't delivering. Can anybody remember Davina's reaction when she announced Susie's name?
No.
I mean, she was overjoyed. I mean, can you remember when? Can you remember when she talked about when we talked about Nikki being evicted and Davina was very somber about it?
Yeah, maybe she wanted her to go during that week as well.
When she said Susie's name to tell her she'd been evicted, Davina was absolutely over the moon. She was loving it. She was like, Susie! She was happy about it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be.
First of all, thing with Susie, when we talk about it, first of all, we're going to have to talk about the golden ticket twist in itself, the concept of that, and then Susie herself as a housemaid, because it was a great idea, though, the whole Willy Wonka thing. And it was just wasted on somebody who, in my opinion, just wasn't interested.
It's nothing. Yeah.
She paid to get in there because she thought it would make her famous because she wanted to get on TV.
Well, actually, her husband paid for her to get in there.
Well, yeah, but she did it, and she said she wanted it. She even admitted in the interview, she said, "I just did it because I wanted to be famous." So yeah,
That worked out well.
yeah.
No.
Yeah, and Davina went very cold with her after that, didn't she? She was just like, "Oh well, nothing really to talk with you about then."
Yeah.
The
number slate.
If anything, though, if there is one positive thing to come out of Susie, it was that it shows why television producers have paid so much money and do months and months of screening processes to choose housemates. Because if you pick someone off the street, they're not going to be interesting enough.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, but what? That's the thing. Yeah, but if you were going to fix it. If it was fixed, they did a bad job. If it wasn't fixed, then it proved never to do this again.
Although, I believe I'm right in saying that Susie was one of the people... Susie actually did audition for Big Brother 5.
Okay.
I think there's like a freeze frame during one of the Big Brother 5 VTs where you can actually see her in the background.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting. So she wasn't someone who was off the street. I think she wanted it for a long time.
That's
Which
good.
is quite...
But she wanted it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. And speaking of bad errors, this is a controversial one. We come to the vote of return. And basically the moment where a lot of people ended up losing a lot of credibility with Channel 4. When I wrote my list of the biggest production decisions, I had this as my number 2. The decision to actually bring someone back. Not so much... I understand the reasons why they did it, because the show was suffering at this point, and you needed to inject some of those big characters back into the show. It was the fact that people paid a lot of hard-earned money to get rid of the likes of Nikki, Grace, Leah, etc. And I mean, like them or not, like the decision or not, they paid the hard-earned money to do that. And for production to stick 2 fingers up and basically say, you don't care anymore to us, I think that hurt a lot of people, and I don't think Channel 4 ever really got that credibility back.
Yeah, maybe this was part of the reason. I think the ratings for the next Celebrity Series are very high, obviously, because everybody saw it and spoke about it. So I don't think it suffered in that case. But and maybe it did hurt the voting. And I think what also hurt the voting was something that happened with, wasn't there, the whole thing with Saturday Night Takeaway or whatever it was, where the voting was proved to be rigged, so all text voting was banned from that point onwards, and I think a lot of the teenage people voted text-wise, and that hurt it, and there was a lot of factors. But to speak about this whole thing, I think if I'd paid the money to vote, I would be upset. However, I remember watching the show, especially when I watched it back the second time, I was like, wow, screw the people in the main house, I want to watch the other house. That's way more entertaining. Because it was like the all-stars of the show. And it was, I may be upset with it from that sense, but dear God, it really made the show better.
Someone's got a call.
Cancel that out.
Yes, but it made... I'll every sentence. Yes, but it definitely made it far more entertaining.
Definitely.
Can't agree more. Now the choices of who they decided to bring in, and also as well, there was a lot of controversies with a couple of people. or whether or not they would have been included. Because Bonnie, I believe, she wasn't allowed in because she didn't pay for a pizza, and Caesar had a rape case.
Didn't pay for a pizza.
Yes, I think didn't have the money to pay for pizza. Got into a bit of argument with them, and that was their excuse not to put Bonnie in.
Wow, okay, that's weak.
Caesar, I understand, but the Bonnie one was just ridiculous, and I wonder if.
What do you say of Caesar's was?
Caesar, I think Caesar got convicted of raping a woman.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
So
that was
The
again.
10 weeks was left.
Yeah, again, he seemed like a prick. He was a prick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I wonder whether or not one of the reasons why they didn't choose Bonnie was because they thought that Bonnie might have a chance to get back in.
Why would they think that?
I think that because you only had the week in there, because she didn't have a suitcase, she might not have. The public might have thought she might have had a chance to show herself.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I mean, Grace, Leah, and Nikki were guaranteed to be there. That fourth one was very much up in the air.
Yeah.
I
I
don't think she would be brought back.
Oh, I'm not saying it, but I'm thinking there might have been a chance. She had just as much chance as someone like Sam Brody. I don't know. But I always found Mikey going back in because the public are paying good money to get Mikey out, and then they're going to pay the good money again to put him back in.
Yeah. No, they're not going to do that.
But that one always confused me, putting Mikey back in. But again, I've never been the biggest lover of the whole vote return, and I think I'm right in saying that Phil Edgar Jones, he was the producer at Endemol at the time, he said, I've made a lot of mistakes in my career. That's one of the biggest.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I enjoyed it at the time, but again, I didn't vote, so.
Yeah. But for a lot of people who did, it would have annoyed a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can see what the problem is, and absolutely, it was a mistake. Maybe they should have, instead of putting somebody back in, maybe they should have just had that other house and had that not be part of the game.
Yeah. Maybe let's say around, I don't know, week 7, week 8, instead of voting to evict, you're voting to put them back into the main house. Put them into the side house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You basically have another show to watch, but they're not eligible to win.
Yes. Other things that happened in week 12, we had Big Brother FM.
Hot topics. With Imogen.
Wait, have we covered the one with the milk? Is that after this?
Oh, the milk one was ages ago. I think we just glossed that because
I enjoyed that one. That made me quite like Imogen because she was good doing that one when she was supposed to let the milk out, and everybody was like, where the hell is it going down?
Yeah.
I have a lot to say about Imogen. We'll get to her when we cover her assessment at the end of this week. Big Brother FM though was a good task. Again, the Pete and Richard dynamic with each other. That was good fun. But of course, when the housemates go into the when they do the vote to return, we have Glen climbing onto the roof to try and get to the second house.
Yeah, doing a kitten there.
But I was thinking Kenneth Tong when it first came up. But yeah. I think I'm right in saying it was really late at night, and I think the other housemates were sleeping. And I remember it was just in the bedroom, and it was really quiet, and then you just hear this thud as Glen jumps onto their part of the roof.
Yeah, I think he was missing that lot a lot because that was his friendship group in the house.
Yeah.
But of course, it leads to Glen getting banned from the decision-making process, which we'll come to later. Richard and Imogen end up getting nominated, and they end up getting put in with the second group. And this brings us on to Richard's behaviour with the returnees, where Richard becomes very much of this brown noser around them, because he'd slagged off the likes of Grace and Nikki. He kept calling Grace horseface. The moment he was in there, he had his lips right on her.
Yeah, I think he's just a person who is used to being liked and he enjoys having a bitch, but he doesn't want to have conflict.
Yeah, totally.
What about you, Joe? Richard's behaviour to the returnees?
I think, as Carl says, it's like he just does it for effect. You know, he's a nice fella, and he just does it, just to have a bitch.
Because he knew he was being entertaining doing it.
Yeah.
And we did have the great Richard moment as well. I think that there was a hole on the settee. Richard tried to climb into it, ended up getting stuck.
Yeah.
We move on though. Imogen is evicted at 53%. Richard had a lot of close evictions actually. Because he just survived against Leah, he only just survived against Imogen. And
maybe some people were seeing what you said. Maybe some people were thinking of him as a bit two-faced.
Yeah, I think Richard was a very divisive character. But this is our chance to talk about Imogen. Now, I understand Imogen does have a big fan base, and she sort of developed in recent years, sort of developed this cult figure who's here as this unintentionally hilarious goofball. I just never bought into it, and maybe it was because I liked Richard and I bought into his spiel about her being dull, boring, and plastic Imogen. I just didn't think that Imogen was interesting at all.
No, I think she's just somebody who was, she was kind of enjoyable in a way. At times she had her moments where she was the ditzy one, but like I said with the milk task, but other than that she just was the bland, not much to her person. And since then I've heard a lot of horrible stories from Richard and Leah about stuff she's been up to.
Yeah, well, of course, there was the whole Ryan Giggs incident. And it was actually quite interesting because, like, when the whole Ryan Giggs thing got brought up, people thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to put Imogen back in? What a great story that would be. And I was just like, you saw her first time, you saw how dull she was. Do you really think that's going to change now?
I think it exposed her as a fame whore. That's what she wanted.
Yeah.
I've just never been the biggest lover of those sort of people who get these cult followings for being just random under the radar characters, because I think Sarah McLean had the same thing in Big
like Rachel Rice, hint hint.
I liked Rachel Rice.
Yeah, I think I think people expected her to be more argumentative or controversial because she'd caused this thing. Like I don't get how that the correlation is between that. Because she caused this scandal, she is now a bitch.
All right, Carl. Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
If there was a competition for dullness between Imogen and Rachel, who would win?
Imogen.
Yeah. Really?
By a long way. Although my winner, if I chose anyone, would be May Sue.
Yeah.
But we'll get back on topic. But I've just never found Imogen that interesting a character, and I don't understand. I know she has fans, and I'm sorry to any of those who do listen, but I've just never loved it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Now we come to the biggest decision of the series, which is the entire house which is left, apart from Glen, who ended up being banned from the decision-making process, get to choose one of the four to come back. What do you make?
And I guess the popularity decision made them swing towards giving Pete what he wanted, which I'm not sure why he wanted it. Like all of a sudden, Nikki wanted Pete, I guess because she realised how popular he was. And then for some reason, Pete saw it the same way. And I don't really know why. Like all of a sudden he liked her. Okay.
Couldn't be conspiracy theories head on though. I think that's because Pete knew how popular Nikki was and how much they could sell to the magazines.
But she'd been voted out.
Showman.
So how popular could she really be?
Well, she was a big character, and Pete needed a showman. I mean, Jenny wasn't interesting enough to carry the Post magazine deals, was she?
Yeah, I think Nikki was the closest thing he'd ever had to a showman. He certainly wasn't going to do it with Leah. He wasn't going to do it with Jenny. So it was what he was left with, and he's like, well, she's kind of popular.
Yeah. But you mentioned it quite quickly how people succumbed to Pete. I get the impression a lot of that main group wanted Leah. I think Richard really wanted Leah.
Yeah, and then he was just like, well, because basically, and again, cynical side of you could say he kind of guilt tripped them into it. He was like, I need Nikki, basically, and Richard was like, okay then.
Yeah. I always would have found it quite interesting on what it would have been like if Leah had gone in, because you can make the argument the vote to return was done with Nikki's mind.
Oh god, yes. That was intention.
Could you imagine if all that planning by production had backfired and Leah had gone in?
Yeah, I don't think Leah would have added much either.
No.
Second time around.
We'll move on to the final week though. Now usually when it comes to the final week we talk about finale night in itself. With this though, there's a couple of things I do want to bring up. The first one was what I dubbed Nikki 2.0. which is the behaviour of Nikki in the house the second time and the air of contrivance over a lot of her actions.
Well, it is. I think what it is like what you said with Ultimate Big Brother which is she went back to being like doe-eyed and cutesy and not as bad.
Well, no, because I actually what I think with 2.0 was that I think Nikki knew what made her popular first time around, which was the arguments and that ridiculous over-the-topness, and she hammed it up too much, and it came across really contrived.
Mm-hmm. And it was the same thing with the relationship. It was I'm guilty. When I watched it the first time, I was very much the person who was sucked in by basically the heroic people and supported the popular people. But when you go back and watch it again now, it's like she did everything she could to basically at least come number 2, and then her reaction when she came out was, "What? I did everything right, though. I did everything you liked the first time." But I especially remember when she threw herself on the floor in the bedroom. That was the moment where it's like, yeah, you're trying to recreate your tantrum over the Susie thing, aren't you? Because you know that people found that entertaining, and she's basically trying to be what she was, but do it deliberately, so it wasn't the same. It was,
yeah. And I just never bought into it, and I don't think the public did either, obviously, because of where she finished in the final run.
And she got booze.
She got booze. And no best bits.
Yeah.
Which we'll come back to that when we talk about her assessment. And the other big issue that we're talking about in week 13, Pete's dream.
I don't remember that.
This is possibly where Pete very nearly came close to losing the whole thing.
Yeah, it was... Throughout the entire thing, it was like, okay, he's popular, and people have started going with him because he's popular, but you never got the sense that he was manipulating it. And then all of a sudden, the last week, he never brought it up before this, he had this whole thing where he had a dream that his friend died, and he said he came back to him and said he was going to win the show, and if he doesn't win the show, he'll be really disappointed and believe all of his dreams will be shattered. Wow, okay, you just bring this up on the final week.
It came across very contrived. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I was quite doe-eyed myself when I watched that. I bought everything that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and that moment where he's in the self club thing, and he does that was basically his winning moment where he did that. Where he was in the diary room and being very entertaining and stuff, and nobody else. And I think that would have been enough to win him the show. That and everything else, he didn't need to do that, and by doing that, he almost cost it himself.
Yeah. And I think as well, the other aspect that the dream did as well was it made people think, hang on a minute, if Pete's contrived this story to get him to where he is, what else has he contrived? Was he genuinely having a tick when he was swearing there? Was he playing up to the cameras when he was messing around with Glen? It made people question a lot of Pete's actions as a result of that.
Yeah, and that's a shame because he is generally quite a nice guy. I mean, whenever I've seen stuff with him, but it's just, I don't know. This was a step he didn't need to go into so far, and it made him not so innocent, and his whole innocent persona is what got him this far.
Yeah. But we move on to finale night, though. Again, this was a big finale night. Again, it shows how event television Big Brother 7 was. I mean, everybody around my family sat around to watch this. It does get off to a quiet start, though, as we lose Jenny.
Yeah, that she was the other 18-year-old who had a boyfriend, so she couldn't have been a showmance for Glen, and since that didn't happen, she was, she was that.
She was there.
Yeah.
That's all it was. I love it when she won. She basically won a place to the final with that board game task, and I would have loved to have seen production there because we would have thought if there was one person we didn't want to win this, it was Jenny.
Mm-hmm. Who went? Yeah, it could have been Imogen at least, and Imogen wasn't much, but at least she was more than Jenny.
You look at the big characters in that of that finale though. You look at Pete, Glen, Ashley, Richard, Nikki, etc. Jenny stands out like a sore thumb.
She was the JJ Bird.
Yeah, there's a name from the past. And I believe she still holds the record for the lowest finale percentage. No.
People were like, okay, yeah, him, her, and oh god, she's still in there.
And I only think that 0.6 would have just been all Jenny's friends and family.
Probably.
Yeah, they're pleasant enough girl, don't get me wrong. Probably would have done well in one of the quieter series, but she had no place being in the finale.
And I think she had almost a moment about that at one point, didn't she? She was upset that she felt like she was being drowned out. I remember that.
Yeah. But from one really quiet character, we come to the big one, Nikki Grahame.
This was the I don't know. She came out. She was like, "What have I done wrong? Why are you booing me?" And then she basically acted shell shocked and wasn't answering questions. And Davina got annoyed with her, and we got annoyed with her. It was like, "Oh, come on, stop it now! Stop acting like a little girl if you don't want to be talked to like a little girl."
But we cannot deny, though, maybe not the second time around, but the first time around, she was one of the greatest characters the show's
Oh
had.
God, yes, she is.
Yeah.
One of my favourite housemates ever, just for unintentional providing that entertainment, because all the others that are all the great housemates do it intentionally. She did it just by being her, which is what the show is supposed to be about. And then, but it was never the same. After you show them that crowd, you can never put them back in because they know exactly. And that's why I liked when they did in 9 when they had the evictions announced from the studio. That is something they should still do to this day. I mean, they don't have a studio anymore, but if they did have a separate studio, it's something they should do.
Well, they have that National Live thing, which they always close up to the eviction, so it's sort of half and half.
Yeah, like maybe have the crowd around them when they're talking, but not when they're speaking to the house.
Unfortunately, we had to lose Joe there. Joe's had to go out. We'll carry this one, just us two. We're going through our assessments of the other housemates. We just talked about Nikki and what an amazing housemate she was. But we had another quite amazing housemate, which is Richard, 4th place finisher.
Again, one of the best diary room narrators ever, as you put it earlier. He was brilliant throughout. He had some fantastic moments in the house. He was the guy who narrated us through, and maybe it's a little false at times, but one of the best.
Yeah, at times I didn't buy into Richard's daddy bear role. I think he did that quite cynically to try and come across as the father figure to Pete. But he was very funny. Again, though, I think he was quite lucky that he did side himself with Pete, because I could very easily picture Richard as a villain in any other series.
If he had sided with the wrong people.
I mean, he was a fun villain, don't get me wrong, but I mean, great housemate though, great snarky, cynical sense of humour.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll move on though. We'll move on to our 3rd place participant, and that is Ashleen. Now, I've always loved Ashleen because, in my opinion, there has been no housemate that went on I know it's a bit of a cliche to say the journey, and Glen got basically the journey storyline with him. Ashleen, for me, went on a far bigger story arc than Glen ever did. I mean, the fact she went in as this ghetto wigger type contestant, which had all this bravado, you don't want to mess with me, that sort of thing, and realised how bad that person was, and to change herself for the better, that was a good arc for me.
Yeah, they even showed it there. They showed like the comparison to, and I mean, she's kind of gone back to that since she was on the show. When you see her these days, but she went from being, again, this fake gangster to being just a nice young girl, and and people realised that, and I think that's ended up what really was the downfall of Nikki, and the reason she was voted out was because she basically was being horrible to Ashleen, even though Ashleen had said sorry and kind of made up with her and become a better person. Nikki just always held against her what she was before.
Yeah. And I think as well with Ashleen is that you saw with the public in those final week. I mean, Ashleen had always had this bit of a cult following on the internet, and that all really been it. More of an anti-Nikki vote more than anything. The build that she got, and she got a lot of people jumping on that bandwagon, and there was a lot of production was, in my opinion, watching Big Mouth, Little Brother, etc. They were getting quite scared at how much momentum Ashleen was building. I don't think she was ever going to beat Pete. I think Pete had it locked on. But I mean, a lot of people had Ashleen to finish 5th, and she ended up jumping Richard and Nikki in that final week, because I think people clicked on and realised here is this girl who has learned from her experience and gone on the biggest journey, and we want to reward that.
Yeah. Why again? the other side of me would say, why did production care who won?
It's all the marketing that goes with it.
Yeah, but what was
I think they-
marketable? What was marketable about Pete? I think Ashleen has done far more with her career since.
Oh, big time, yeah. Are there any great Ashley moments that come to mind for you? What's the standout qualities about her for you?
She again, it was the journey, but also she had some great arguments, some great comebacks and moments that she had, and then she just became a nice girl who was entertaining towards the end.
Yeah, I've always been a big supporter of Ashleen, and I know when I send this to Digital Spy, they'll say the same thing.
Yeah, I've never understood the take a side thing. I enjoyed both of them. There was times where I took their side in an argument, but I never completely would turn on anybody.
Yeah. We come to that final two, though. It's Glen versus Pete. I remember the two of them basically getting into a pillow throwing fight. They absolutely trashed that living room when it was just them two between each other, which I found was quite fun. Of course, Pete ends up winning the show. We'll come to him later. This is our chance to talk about Glen, our naive little Welshman. And he did go on his own journey. I know that's the big Dermot O'Leary spiel, because Dermot absolutely adored Glen. But he genuinely did. He grew up as a man.
Yeah, he did. He changed at the house. He went in as a boy and came out a lot wiser, a lot different. He had a great experience in there. And to this day, that's the reason he still goes on all the spin-off shows and stuff, because how much that experience meant to him.
But as you've always mentioned as well, though, when you look back at Glen, people always like to paint Glen, oh, he was this hilarious boy, he was goofy, he was funny. He did have that dark edge to him in who he sided with, what he said. He wasn't the sweetness in life that a lot of people made him out to be.
No, he definitely was part of that group. He's probably had that kind of friendship group at home. It's just he had that innocent edge and side to him that people latched onto and kind of ignored the other side.
What great Glen moments come to mind for you? Because we mentioned some of them in the early stages. I mean, everybody remembers cooking an egg. There was a great moment as well where you just spent like 5 minutes in the diary room just talking about how great black pudding was. I always found that funny, just in my strange head.
He had a lot of them. Just the young boy moments that everybody remembers him for. The egg. There was the jumping on the roof. There was the. I also remember him getting really upset about the whole Welsh thing as well.
Yes. Do you think Glen would have made a better winner than Pete if you had to choose between the two?
Knowing now, probably. Just because I know that. There's a big question mark, a big asterisk next to Pete, which is the problem. I mean, as entertaining as he was, it was like how much of that was genuine. With Glen, you could tell because we saw that other side of him that he was too naive to be that manipulative.
Yeah, and it brings us on to Pete. We have to talk about him as a winner and as a housemate, because I think with Pete, if you look at a lot of pop culture in general, there's some things that age well and you can enjoy it in this day and age. And there's some things which just don't stand the test of time. I mean, you can't see people watching a Keenan and Kel episode, for example. I think Pete's very similar to that. I think Pete was somebody who I think a lot of people appreciated back at the time. And even myself, I thought he was a good winner. When you look back on him now, after you've seen like another 8 years of Big Brother and you've seen the type of people that wins, everything about him has this air of contrivance. And I mean, I know that Pete's had a lot of tragedy in his life, and I know he's had a lot of problems. But I get the impression he used that as emotional bait to win the show in a lot of cases. And I think a lot of his actions were quite contrived. I think he emotionally manipulated people. As you mentioned, there's always this air of doubt over Pete and what was genuine about him.
Yeah, I do think there is that side of that which kind of spoils it, but he still was one of the better winners. Because even no matter how contrived it was, people are also the same people who say it's contrived are the same people who wanted Gina to win. Everything about Gina and guys like that were contrived. Everything about the villains was contrived. So why shouldn't a so-called hero? Maybe it's because people thought of him as a hero, and because he wasn't that, they felt betrayed, and that's why. But other than that, I don't think he did everything he did from beginning to end. He was the most storylines in the house, other than perhaps the two girls. He was involved in everything. He provided so many great moments of entertainment. So he's above probably about 60% of the winners.
Yeah, I've always had Pete about in that sort of middle tier. I've always had him around the Craig sort of range. I wouldn't put him at the top tier with the likes of Brian, Nadia, Aaron, etc. But he's certainly not Sam or Cameron.
No, absolutely not. He provided a lot for that show.
Yeah, I mean, he was a fun character. Whether or not that was false, that's up to people. And I think that's actually still causing a lot of debate, Pete's contrivance or not. But it gives us a chance to assess Big Brother 7 as a series. People consider it the greatest ever. Do we?
That's the big question, isn't it? Which one is it? It always fluctuates between this and 5, and even 6 sometimes enters in there. Because 6 had some great moments, but
6 had some great characters,
which we'll obviously get onto next time. But it's one of those that has to come into the conversation just because of how, even though it flattened out towards the end, how good when it was great, it was really, really great.
Just the great characters it brought to us. It brought Nikki, Aisling, Pete, Glen, Richard.
And we maybe had characters on that par since, but the show was hot. It's we again, not to cross the audiences, but I brought up the analogy earlier towards wrestling. People to this day, there may have been better characters this day, but everybody always remembers the Austin era because of how hot it was.
Yeah, definitely agree there. But that is all we have time to talk about with Big Brother 7. It's been absolutely amazing to talk about it, very nostalgic. And we hope...
Finally, when we finally got to do it.
Finally got around to doing it, even though Joe didn't make it all the way. But until next time, that's been it for Big Brother 7. My name's been Carl Bainbridge. That's been Carl Dutton.
Hello, yes, goodbye. Hello, that's the opposite of what I meant to say.
And of course, Joe Tilly earlier. And I hope you join us for our next episode, which hopefully will be Celebrity Big Brother 4. Bye-bye for now.
See you later. God, that year was a lot of talking points. Then the next one is the celebrity one, which is everybody calls the best celebrity one as well. This was an amazing time, wasn't it? To be
absolutely amazing. Just a great run of series. I'm going to have to log off, Carl, because I'm being called for my dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for...
no problem. I'm really sorry that I was a bit late, and I'm sorry that we've had all the problems that I basically kept forgetting and holding you guys up. Sorry.
Would you be willing to do the audio editing for this week?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
No problem.
It's just I've got a lot on me hands right now. I don't think I'll have the time to do it.
All right. Yeah, cool. I'll edit that and send that your way.
Thank you very much, Carl.
All right.
Speak to you later. Just cut out all the mistakes and...
Yeah. I've been doing an audio podcast. I do podcasts anyway, so I know what's going out.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak to you later, Carl.
All right. Catch you later. Bye.
Bye.